Hails and welcome to the Rauta Sonic Trio. Once again, we have three different albums from three different parts of the world and three different styles, of course. And two of these are actually older. One is a newer one, 2024, but the other ones are like 2021. First, we'll go in alphabetical order, and then I'll guide you through with the given styles, given albums, according to my own opinion, from worst to best. That's how it goes. So, alphabetically, first one is Ottone, Pesante, Ottone Pesante. Scrolls of War from Italy. This is not technically speaking metal at all, but borderline one. We'll talk about that in a bit. Then we have Sterbefall with Verlorene Zeit. Sounds like a German band, but technically speaking, this is from Russia. At least some of the lyrics are at least in German, maybe all of them. So, not exactly your typical Russian band. And then we have Kronakh, and which is from Ukraine. This is also 2021 release. So, a couple of older ones from my everlasting review pile and one 2024 one. So, now let's go from worst to best according to my own opinion, and feel free to disagree. So, we'll head to Ukraine with Kronakh. This is from GrimmDistribution, which just is the side label of Satanath, which is here with the other album. This one is The End of Time Records, also mentioned here, and as well as a couple of other labels. Don't know honestly why there's so many labels even mentioned. And in case you're wondering, this Stonewounds is the name of the album. Here they are in, I guess, in Ukrainian version of the language as well as English. So both languages are represented here. A trio of all people, and summer 2020 was recorded, and as you can see, some of the riffs were created 2013, 2014, so quite old stuff, and was released in 2021, so already 3 years ago, but this came late to the party. This is the second album by the band, and this is something that you could label as black death metal. Actually, Metal Archives calls it black death metal with atmospheric twist, or atmospheric black death metal. Anyway, that is actually quite accurate in my opinion, because that's exactly how the band is. As you can figure out, there's no photos or whatever, so let's go with this atmospheric cover. This music is something that you can just put in a box of atmospheric death black metal, because when you're thinking your typical death and black metal, you might go for war metal, and this is not that. This is more on the atmospheric side of black metal, but with quite a bit of death metal in the twist, including some of the vocal parts and all. So yeah, it's kind of a in-betweener, a hybrid sorts of an album, if you will. Technically speaking, production and all, you can say this is pretty strong. But when it comes to the actual music, in my opinion, this is not the best of both worlds kind of a thing with death and black metal, but quite the opposite. This is in fact trying so hard to pick the best parts from black metal and combine it with the death metal parts, but doesn't really make sense. It is probably closer to melodic death metal than your typical death metal, not to mention brutal death metal if you really think about it. I mean, all the riffs and parts. So it doesn't sound like typical death metal at all, in my opinion. Actually, you could say it's more like a black metal with twist, or atmospheric black metal with a twist. I mean, there are parts, the whole concept is something that you could kind of make it work, but none of here really sticks. It's kind of a work in progress of an album, in my opinion, like production and all, yes, good. But when it comes to, indeed, the songwriting, even on the level of individual riffs, no cigar this time. Secondly, on this pile is Ottone Pesante, which with Scrolls of War continues with their previous albums, of which some of I got to review back in the days. This is music, instrumental music done with brass instruments, so literally metal. But when it comes to the actual music, it's very, very debatable whether this counts as metal at all. For example, I understand why this isn't exactly listed on Metal Archive's site, because technically speaking, this doesn't sound metal. I mean, you don't have guitar space and all. You have drums, of course, but with that, it's trombone and other, brass instruments you go with. So when you remove guitars and bass and even vocals from the music, how can you be metal? Well, you could go Wisas and say, but the instruments are made of metal, trombones and all. So yeah, and they kind of do the music with that twist. But once you kind of lose it, there's only so far as you can go before you kind of step out of the boundaries. As you can see, there is no booklet, which kind of makes sense. There are no lyrics. It's instrumental. And that's part of the pitfalls here. The thing here is, for a while, this is actually quite interesting. As their previous album, which wasn't the previous, but probably the album before that, which I got to hear. And I found it fascinating back in the days, because what they guys do is actually quite of interesting. To be honest, if you really think about it, what Apocalyptica did with their stuff of Metallica by 4 cellos, technically speaking, doing thrash metal with, cellos. This is basically the same thing, but with their original songs, but with brass instruments. For a while, it sounds like a cool thing, but then when there are no vocals and all, it kind of becomes more like a gimmick kind of a thing. Don't get me wrong, for a soundtrack thing, for, say, a weird art movie and all, you would sound like, okay, this is very, very fitting. So it's almost like an avant-garde-ish take on rock and metal music. It's not really metallic enough to sound like metal, and because there are no vocals, it can get a little bit boring over a while. There is just not too much variation with the songs, and to be honest, frankly said, there are no good songs enough to make it really good. But it's interesting, and these guys doing something unique, so it's gotta be worth for something. I know it's an acquired taste of a kind of a thing, and which is why I find this hard to recommend. But if you like something else, give Ottone Pesante a chance. At least it doesn't sound like anything else you heard, I'm guessing. Because at least me going through thousands and thousands of albums throughout 30 plus years, and 40, but as a review to do 22 years or so, never got to encounter any other band that sounds like that. So it's an interesting thing, but not really that great of an album. And the last and the best so far is Sterbefall. And this album is the 4th album by these Russian guys making German-sounding music. And this is technically speaking doom death. On Metal Archive site, this is more labeled as black death post-black / death metal, if I remember correctly. But to be honest, on this album, it hardly sounds like black metal at all. The sound is very, very autumnal, kind of giving the impression this is a soundtrack to fall. And I would say now in mid-October and all, when I'm filming this is exactly a soundtrack to that. Now, if you remove the clean vocals or female vocals and you just replace them with more that metallic approach, you get like My Dying Bride in a twist. So less gothic, less dramatic, but more death metallic. And I think these guys are actually pretty good with this album, because this sounds like heavy, it sounds moody, it sounds melancholic. It's not overly dramatic, and it's definitely not kind of a soft to listen to. It's almost like a, slow-paced death metal, but then again leaning a little bit more, say, death than bands like Asphyx, Ball Thrower, Obituary and all. So there is a definition when you kind of are just like mid-tempo or slow-tempo death metal, and we're near doom death. But then again, I would say these are related, not maybe closely, but there are similarities. But because of the given nature of this melancholia and kind of a sadness and grieving feeling, momentum and all, I would say this is definitely more on the doom death metal side of things. And if you are into that genre, there is no reason to skip this one. I think this is definitely the best of the pile here. But one thing this album is missing is the outright hit songs. What I mean, the really memorable parts and all that stuff. But the atmosphere, it makes a lot up for that. So there is this. So 3 different albums, Black Death, Doom Death, and brass instruments, rock metal, whatever you want to call it. Check out the links provided in the description box in case you want to know more about them, if you want to dive into the discography, and check out the band's social media and listen to the music. And I hope you like at least some of them, if not all of them. And now you know a little bit more. Let's hope there's something worth you. If not, maybe the next episode will. Off you go. Bye-bye.